Good morning. This is Mary Copeland with Compass and Clock, and today we have a special guest, John Platt of Profiduciary or Profiducia, and he's going to talk to us about what a fiduciary is and what their responsibilities are. So John, welcome, and thank you so much for giving us this educational segment of the meeting today.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate your invitation and appreciate everyone being here this morning. To maybe set the stage a little bit, I'd like to read to each of you an email that I received from Mary back in the end of July confirming today's meeting. And it says, "You are presenting to the Compass and Clock members at the August monthly meeting, August 10. Your topic is, what is a fiduciary and what are their responsibilities? And your allotted time is 8:40 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I hope everybody has plenty of snacks." Just kidding. I'm sure. Anyway, my name is John Platt. Profiducia is a business that provides fiduciary services, which of course is what I'm going to explain. But before I go there, I want everybody to understand that everybody here actually is a fiduciary. At different times in our lives, we all have a fiduciary responsibility, which by definition, the word fiduciary comes from the Latin fiducia, which translated is essentially a trusted person, someone who is engaged or asked to hold or manage or take care of something of value for someone else. So here's my wallet. I don't know if I were to give my wallet to Charla and say, "Hey, Charla, will you hold this for me while I do this bungee jump thing? And presuming that I come back safely, can I have my wallet back?" During that period of time, Charla is my fiduciary. So in our modern day times, the legal community that provides the structure for our civilization, one of the areas of that legal community is estate planning. And I think we're all well acquainted with estate planning attorneys who help guide our society by crafting law and crafting documents that help individual people make plans for what they want to have happen to their wallet or their house or their bank account in the event that they can't take care of it any longer for themselves. Individual people sit down with an attorney, and the attorney memorializes that individual's wishes and what he or she wants to have happen to their things, maybe while they're still alive and perhaps unable to do something for themselves, or perhaps after they're no longer alive, what happens to their stuff after they're gone. And those documents that are prepared by attorneys, those documents, each one identifies a fiduciary role. Traditionally, since European law or English law that was exported over many years here to North America, traditionally what people have done to identify a fiduciary is somebody near them, maybe a son or a daughter or a nephew or somebody that is within their circle that they identify as someone that they can trust to get something done for them. Somebody reliable, perhaps somebody maybe good with numbers, maybe somebody good at managing multiple things. But obviously, as our lives have changed, as our society has changed, for some, there isn't necessarily an immediate, obvious choice of a fiduciary in their immediate circle. And so the purpose of a professional fiduciary is to help fill that gap where there is someone who needs someone to be the executor of their estate or needs someone to be the agent under their power of attorney, and they either don't have or don't want to choose from their immediate circle of friends. So, but whether it's a professional fiduciary or a family member who's a fiduciary or any of us, the fiduciary's responsibilities are to essentially, in very, very broad terms, to step into the shoes of, to act in the best interest of, to behave thoughtfully and care for the property of the individual who has asked them to take on that role. So the individual goes to their attorney, they sit down, they ask the attorney to, I want you to memorialize what it is I want to have happen to my stuff, and I want this person over there to take care of it. That individual is now the fiduciary for to act in the best interest of the person writing that will or that power of attorney when they are no longer able to do it themselves. So being in the business of being a professional fiduciary, of course, gives us lots and lots and lots of stories of real life situations where that I think work really well to illustrate the point of why we do what we do. And I can tell you about one that we have going right now, where there's a gentleman who is in his early 90s. He's living in an adult family home. Many years ago, he appointed his 2 years younger brother to be his power of attorney. And his younger brother is a very good man and a very proud man, and a man whose wife is also terribly ill. And unfortunately, the 92-year-old brother has an account at a credit union, not a bank, credit union down in Vancouver, Washington, very small, limited footprint, no branch up here in the Seattle area where his fiduciary younger brother is. Younger brother, not only can he have a hard time getting away from his home because he's very busy, understandably, taking care of his ill wife, there's no way he can get down to Vancouver, Washington to deal with the bank. And the bank, of course, is saying that unless somebody shows up in person, they cannot accept powers of attorney or they cannot accept orders from a power of attorney just simply over the phone. Somebody has to go in person to be there. And this is an instance where an individual, based on a decision that they made a long time ago, chose his younger brother to be his fiduciary. And now both of them, unfortunately, are a little bit of a catch-22. The older brother is unable to update his estate planning because in order to do so, he would need to call his younger brother. But he can't call his younger brother because the younger brother is responsible for paying his bills, and he hasn't paid for his older brother's cell phone bill. So the cell phone's been shut off. The older brother can't call out. The younger brother can't be reached. And it becomes this circle, this catch-22 that frankly creates a lot of stress and a lot of concern for those around them, those people that love them, that care and want to see something happen, which is specifically why we even know about this particular instance, because they reached out to us to help us, to ask us to help them see if there was a way for us to help break that cycle that they are trapped in. So the responsibility of a fiduciary is to be aware of everything that needs to be done in the life of an individual while they're alive. If we're acting with power of attorney, it's also to be responsible for all earthly property after someone has passed. The job of the fiduciary is to, in the event of a death, is to marshal the assets, which means find everything, gather it all up, pay any unpaid bills, file any unfiled tax returns, look for any unclaimed property, clean everything up, and distribute assets as desired and as indicated by the decedent, file a final tax return, and then it's done. And that's a project that obviously has a very definite beginning and a very definite end. And it's a responsibility that for many people is something that they try to do on top of their day job. If it's a family member that's been asked or a friend that has been asked, it's something that they are trying to juggle on top of what they do for a living. So being a professional fiduciary gives the individual who is doing the forward planning to make a plan that does not create a burden for one of their family members or one of their friends. Do you guys have any questions at this point? That was a lot of talking on my part, and we haven't gotten to the karaoke yet.
John, you wrote an article in the spring issue of Compass and Clock, and
Yes.
you used an example where a family reunion was happening, and the father told the daughter, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. You know, you went to college," whatever the case may be. She went to college. She's well established now. She's got a job. She's starting a family, and I'm going to make you the executor of my estate. And that sounded all well and good then, and she was flattered. Wow.
Yeah.
And then, but the reality of it is then many years later, when dad passes, the responsibilities are enormous, or can be enormous.
Sure. I mean, we all know that what's the old saying? Give the job to the busiest person, because they clearly know how to get things done. And so it's very common that when someone is choosing a family member to be their fiduciary, they look and they say, well, let's choose her because she's the one that has the business degree. Those other two kids, one of them finished school and one of them kind of didn't, and let's choose her. And besides, she really has her act together. She has that nice job with the bank and somehow gets her kids up and going every morning. She's the responsible one. Let's choose her. And of course, she's not going to say no if asked. She doesn't know what's ahead for her. She's going to say, I'm flattered, I'm honored, I appreciate that you would think of me that way. And then 10 years or more go by. She's just that much busier because she's a get it done kind of person. So now what used to be a to-do list this long is now this long, at the point that she's called in to serve as that fiduciary. So she's even busier than she was when she was initially asked. And not only is she now in the role of dealing with all of the loose ends, and believe me, there are very many loose ends, even in the most organized of estates. Not only is she really busy with that, but she's also grieving. She's also reminded daily, every time she opens that file drawer to work on closing dad's estate, she's reminded that she misses him, that she was honored, that she was so close to him, and so this is a way, by choosing somebody who's neutral, by choosing somebody who's not a family member, it's a way to actually honor someone's children, to not isolate one and have her be the one with all the responsibility. I see a hand, Lisa.
Thanks, John. You did a great job of explaining all that. That's exactly where we are right now. I am one of 10 kids, and it's a combined family. My parents have been married for 47 years, and it's a second marriage for them. I'm 8 of my father's children, and she brought 2 in on her own. I represent my dad's side of the family, and my stepbrother represents, my mom, because he's just the only one left now. And I'm not exactly looking forward to this day, to be honest with you. My parents are still alive. They're 91 and 89. And I am one of the executors, and I'm not exactly excited about this because I feel that there's going to be some dissension, and I don't know. I am overwhelmed. So I think this was a perfect day to, discuss this. And as we get closer to my parents, getting, to go in this life. Unfortunately, I don't want him to go, but
Sure.
It's inevitable, and I have to be prepared that call could come any day, and here we are.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's a big responsibility. And as our world, our financial world, legal world has become more complicated, banking certainly is different. Just getting information or resources to a bank or from a bank, the number of layers that have to be gone through now, which completely understandable, but imagine trying to deal with the hurdles that get put up in front of people, and to only be able to have your lunch hour to do that on. If you're the family fiduciary and I've got 1 hour, my lunch break, to go to the bank and get this done, and you show up and you're missing that one piece of information they're looking for, come back next week, or come back the next day when you have that bit of information. So there's enough complexity growing complexity in life in general and in the fiduciary responsibilities that banks have for their clients and other institutions have, the need for being able to demonstrate passwords and personal identity, to even just setting up or closing down an account with Cascade Natural Gas requires your social security number. It's a lot involved, and it's a lot for one person to manage by themselves. So one of the values of having a fiduciary business do it is that business typically works as a team. It's not a one person shouldering the entire load. It's a shared responsibility and an opportunity to work smart, not just work hard.
John?
Yes.
John, I was going to see, Deborah, do you have any questions? Because I know you're going to pop off earlier than the rest of us. Do you
and
have
then Candy, I saw your hand too. We'll get to you after Deborah.
Okay. And then John, can you also talk about, because you can be a fiduciary while people are still alive and help the family that way.
I'll explain that. Yep. Go ahead, Deborah.
I don't have any questions at this point, but if I do, I will reach out to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And as I said at the beginning, if you will send me an email or a phone number, I promise I will follow up with you.
I already did it. It's in the chat box.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks so much. And goodbye to everybody. Have a wonderful August. See you in September.
Bye, Deborah.
So
Okay,
I think Candy has the question.
Just really quick, and maybe you said this and I missed it. So you are hired on, I guess, for lack of a better word, before the person, needs the help. So like you're planned ahead, or you're assigned by the attorney. I'm confused. Sorry, I don't.
Great question.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. So, in the ideal situation, ideal circumstance, people planning ahead, anticipating, they go to their attorney, and the attorney says, I'm going to produce 2 documents. Oftentimes there's more than 2, but we're just going to talk about 2 documents today. I'm going to produce a document that describes what you want to have happen, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, what you want to have happen in the event that you're alive, but you can't do things for yourself. Maybe you've gone to Belize for a year, or maybe you've gone to New Zealand for a year, and you want someone to able to step into your shoes and act on your behalf. And so I'm creating a document that gives you power of attorney. And what that means is, and the document is very powerful, it gives the fiduciary, let's say Mary Claire is the fiduciary named in that power of attorney. Mary Claire can take that power of attorney document and walk into Mr. and Mrs. Jones' bank with the document and with her driver's license, which is in her wallet, and say, I have power of attorney for Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and they're out of the country for a long time, and they've asked me to pay their bills. They've asked me to deposit these checks that came in. They've asked me to turn off Comcast because they're not going to be watching it for the next 12 months while we're using it. So it allows people to do things for someone else while those people are alive. And obviously that covers instances that are maybe not as much fun as traveling to Belize or New Zealand. It might be a time when somebody's recuperating from an illness or an injury, or maybe has some cognitive decline. Sometimes people come out of a power of attorney and sometimes they don't. And the power of attorney document, piece of paper that's produced by the lawyer, it only covers fiduciary needs while someone is still alive. As soon as someone dies, that power of attorney document is gone. Its effectiveness is terminated. And the other document that the attorney produced for Mr. and Mrs. Jones is called a last will and testament. And we always talk about the will, but what's in the will? Read the will, look at the will. And that document doesn't do anything until someone passes away. So the power of attorney document dissolves and the last will and testament kicks into gear. And the last will and testament also has a fiduciary role that's identified, and that is what we used to call an executor or executrix, male and female. Today, common language is they just use the words personal representative, and they sometimes substitute that for, or shorten it to PR. Who's the PR of so-and-so's estate? Who's the PR named in the will? And their job doesn't kick into gear until someone has passed away. And if people are going into their attorney's office and planning ahead, they can hire a company like ours today, for example, to say, I don't want to choose one of my kids, or I don't have any kids, or I don't want to ask my friends because they're the same age I am. I want to hire somebody to be ready to serve me and my needs when that time comes. So that's one answer to your question. There are instances, 60% of the US population does not have an estate plan, which is kind of a crazy big number in my opinion. But regardless, with that many people who do not have a will, there are a lot of people who die without a will. And in those instances, then people do get appointed by the government, by the superior court of the state, who has jurisdiction over this sort of thing. They get appointed by the state court system to be the administrator of an estate. It's the same thing as being an executor, but they give it a different name because it indicates the presence or absence of a will. And when you're the administrator of an estate, which means you knew nothing at all about these people before they died, and you're literally parachuting in, those often are the ones that they can be pretty interesting from a complexity standpoint, because the fact that there was no plan means that what you're parachuting into is more likely to be somewhat more chaotic. But the state of Washington has a vested interest, very strong interest in seeing estates like to get closed, whether there was a will or whether there was not one. It doesn't do society any good to have estates just kind of left open. Those bank accounts have to get closed, those taxes have to get paid, creditors need to get paid off, property has to transfer hands. And so it's embodied in law to make sure that there is closure. Did that answer your question, Candy? Okay.
Can I ask a question, John? Also, am I not correct that there are times when we've actually helped executors, correct, or PRs that have been appointed? We've come alongside them when they say, I can't do this.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so like in
Yeah.
Lisa's case, we've actually helped people and said,
Correct.
yeah, okay, and then become like that neutral third party.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes there's a couple ways to go about that. If somebody's in the role of being the executor and they're saying, holy cow, I had no idea it was going to be like this. I want somebody to guide me is one choice that they can make. I want a coach, an executor coach sort of role, or I just don't want to do it. If I could step aside and let somebody else do it, I would do that. And so those are the two typical choices. If somebody is in that role of being the PR and they having second thoughts about doing it, that they do have a couple of choices.
So question, are you guys both just for Washington, or can you work outside of Washington?
Well, most of our work is here in the state of Washington, but we do have clients out of state.
Okay.
In Oregon, in Idaho. Might actually, this could be exciting. We may have one in Hawaii soon, a referral from a client here in Washington. So, and the laws do differ. Probate laws differ from state to state. What I'm telling you today, the little bit of knowledge that I have about it is applicable only to the state of Washington. And I should have said at the beginning to make it really clear, I am not an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not someone who practices law. I've just been around it often enough that I can talk like in a way that makes people think I might know something. So and a good way to think of what our role is in relation to an attorney is a real good analogy is if you think of an attorney, a estate planning attorney, as being an architect. If that architect, if that attorney is acting as an architect, if she's the architect, then we're the general contractor. The general contractor doesn't produce the blueprints. The architect does. If she produces a will, then our job is to look at the will and see what it says we're supposed to do, and then use our best effort and best judgment and sense of responsibility to execute what needs to be, what was called out, what was memorialized by the decedent. So.
I'm going to add just a couple of things for clarification. Number one, a power of attorney, also known as POA. There's financial and healthcare. For Profiducia, I would assume that you're the POA for financial. And when a POA is created by your attorney, Richard and Tony, that are part of Compass and Clock, members like you folks, they advocate that it's effective immediately. So if you're putting a power of attorney in place, if it's not effective immediately, when it does need to take effect, it's usually because there was a healthcare crisis. And then you have to get the approval from a doctor, 2 approvals, I think, to get it to be activated. So that's just one thing that I've learned over the years. And the other thing in your presentation today, John, you, as an attorney, they're licensed in certain states, but Profiducia, your firm that you've created, can help folks in other states.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Correct. And that's a really good call out on the different kinds of powers of attorney, and when they start is a key feature, what they call there's sort of a legal term for it, but essentially there's upon signing, when the client signs their power of attorney document in the lawyer's office, the language in that power of attorney document is really important to know, when does power of attorney become bestowed upon the fiduciary? Is it at the moment of signing that power of attorney, or is it upon a declaration of incompetence? And honestly, one of the common measurements of someone's inability to act on their own behalf, a demonstration of their incompetence, is their inability to recognize, what is it? They have a funny legal name for it, recognize their own bounty, which means they don't recognize their own children. If they're in a room, if they have lost their cognitive ability to recognize that that's their daughter and that's their son. But the problem with that is, what if they don't have a daughter or a son? Or what if the daughter and son don't live in anywhere nearby, and getting them to walk into the hospital room is just not all that convenient. So more and more, they are passing over that part of writing a power of attorney in lieu of just having it made effective upon signing, so that you don't have to wait for a crisis to be able to act. Because at the end of the day, what all of this is about, the last will and testament, the powers of attorney, what it's all about is delivering peace of mind to the people who are planning ahead, who have things that they're worried about. What's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my pets? What's going to happen to my stuff in the event that I'm in a coma or I'm dead? I need peace of mind today to know that I have a plan, and that plan includes somebody that I know is set up to succeed at taking care of my stuff.
Also, John, in Candy's world and in Beth's world, they both work in senior housing communities.
Mm-hmm.
I can guarantee that they have come across what I would term an elder orphan. You have a resident that doesn't have a family member,
right,
that maybe they're deceased, maybe they never had children and their spouse is now gone. Maybe they never got married, or the case could be that, they're just alone. And those are folks that you should keep Profiducia in mind when they're residents at your communities, because Profiducia is a trusted partner. You know, to do what Profiducia is doing, you need to have trust. It needs to be about a relationship. You can't just have anybody step in and do the role that they're doing. So just keep their card handy for your residents.
Thank you.
I happen to have great respect for John. I would refer anybody to him. He comes from good people.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
And
It's-
where's Selma and Joe? I want to see them.
Well, they,
Are they back yet?
so Selma and Joe are my parents. You guys, at the beginning, I talked a little bit about my grandmother, which is how Beth and I know each other. My grandmother lived at the lodge, right? So yeah, the lodge for last few years of her life. And she was really, really healthy, by the way. She had 2 months before her 102nd birthday, she was still walking 2 miles a day. And then it was just the last couple months where it wasn't so great. But my parents, Beth, used to live up on Lost Mountain Road, up behind where the old Costco was, that's now the PUD station. And they moved about 2 years ago to, it's kind of right on the edge between